Alright, listen up, stays, and honestly, even if you're not a stay, you're gonna want to stick around for this one. Because what we're about to break down today isn't just some random fan-made compilation or a cute fancam edit you scroll past on Twitter at 2 a.m. No, this is a deep dive, a real deep dive into the 7 moments from Stray Kids' journey that even the most veteran, day one, pre-debut era stays still think about when they're lying in bed at night. Moments that hit different. Moments that shaped who these 8 guys are today. Now here's the thing, Stray Kids debuted on March 25th, 2018, under JYP Entertainment, and since then they've shattered records, sold out stadiums worldwide, and built one of the most passionate fan bases in the history of K-pop. But behind all those trophies, behind the Billboard charts, behind the Maniac World Tours and the dominoes, there are moments that the cameras almost didn't catch. Moments so raw, so painfully real, that they remind you these aren't just idols. They're people. So let me ask you this. Do you remember the one moment that made an entire fandom cry without a single word being spoken? Do you know which member almost gave up everything just months before debut? And what about that one live stage that was never supposed to happen, but ended up becoming legendary? If you think you know Stray Kids inside and out, I dare you to watch this whole list without getting emotional. I dare you. Because number 7 alone is going to hit you like a freight train. So smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on that notification bell, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. Let's get into it. Number 7. The boy who walked in through the front door, the audition that nobody expected. You want to know something wild? In a group like Stray Kids, where most of the members were either scouted on the street, discovered through JYP's internal training pipeline, or handpicked by Bang Chan himself, there was one member who did it the old-fashioned way. No connections. No street casting. No lucky break caught on camera. Just a kid, standing in a line with thousands of other dreamers, holding a number tag, waiting for his 3 minutes in front of a panel of judges who had already seen hundreds of faces that same day. That kid was Kim Seungmin. And if you're an old stay, you already feel that lump forming in your throat right now, because you know the story, and you know exactly why it still hits different all these years later. Let's rewind. It was 2017. JYP Entertainment held its 13th open audition, one of the most competitive public auditions in the entire K-pop industry. We're not talking about some small local talent show. This is JYP. The house that built Rain, 2 p.m., got 7 twice. The acceptance rate? Laughably low. We're talking tens of thousands of applicants from all over South Korea and beyond, and only a tiny, tiny fraction ever make it past the first round. Most trainees at the big 3 agencies, SM, YG, JYP, they get in through connections, through casting scouts who spot them at events, on the subway, walking down the street in Gangnam. That's how a lot of idols enter the system. But Seungmin? He literally walked in through the front door. No one came looking for him. No one tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey kid, you've got the look." He made the decision himself. He prepared himself. He showed up. And this is where it gets really, really interesting, because what did he sing at that audition? He chose Congratulations by Day 6. Now, if you know anything about Seungmin, you know that his love for Day 6, and especially for Young K, isn't just casual fandom. This is deep, genuine admiration. The kind of admiration that makes a teenager think, I want to stand on a stage like that someday. And he channeled every ounce of that admiration into his audition performance. Think about what that takes. You're 16 years old. You're standing in a sterile audition room. The fluorescent lights are buzzing above you. There's a long table in front of you with industry professionals who have seen literally everything. They're tired. They've heard 100 mediocre covers already that morning. And you're not a prodigy. You're not some once-in-a-generation vocal talent that makes people gasp the second you open your mouth. You're a kid from a regular family with a dream that statistically, mathematically, almost certainly will not come true. But you sing anyway. You sing like your entire future depends on these 3 minutes, because it does. And here's the thing about Seungmin's voice back then, it wasn't what it is today. Let's be honest about that. Old stays who watched the survival show remember. His vocals were raw, undeveloped. You could hear the potential buried in there like a diamond still covered in rock, but it wasn't polished yet. He didn't have the controlled vibrato, the emotional phrasing, the effortless stability that he's known for now. What he had was something that you can't teach, something that no vocal coach in the world can install into a trainee. He had sincerity. Pure, unfiltered, almost painfully honest sincerity. And somehow, that was enough. He passed. Against all odds, against every statistic, Kim Seungmin walked into JYP Entertainment's open audition as a complete nobody and walked out as a trainee. But, and this is the part that old stays know all too well, passing the audition was just the beginning of his pain. Because when the survival show Stray Kids started airing in October 2017, Seungmin found himself surrounded by members who had been training for years. Bangchan had been in the JYP system since 2010, that's 7 years of training before the show even began. Changbin and Han were already recognized as elite-level rappers within the company. Hyunjin and Lee No were dancers who could command a stage with their bodies alone. Felix had that voice, that impossibly deep, unforgettable voice. And then there was Seungmin, the new guy. The one who got in through the open audition just months ago while everyone else had years of training under their belt. Can you imagine how that felt? Can you imagine sitting in a practice room at 2 a.m., watching Changbin spit firebars effortlessly, watching Hyunjin nail choreography on the third try, watching Han compose entire songs in his head, and knowing that you just got here? That everyone else has a head start measured not in weeks or months, but in years? That's the kind of pressure that breaks people. That's the kind of gap that makes trainees quietly pack their bags and go home, convincing themselves that maybe this isn't for me. And nobody would have blamed Seungmin if he had done exactly that. But he didn't. And this is what makes his story one that old stays still carry in their hearts. Instead of shrinking, instead of letting the gap crush him, Seungmin did what Seungmin does. He worked. Quietly. Relentlessly. Without drama. Without tears on camera, without big dramatic speeches about never giving up. He just worked. Every single day. Old stays remember watching the survival show and noticing how Seungmin was always in the practice room. Always the last one to leave. Always asking for one more take, one more run-through, one more chance to get it right. He wasn't the loudest person in the room. He wasn't the one cracking jokes to ease the tension or rallying the team with inspirational speeches. He was the one in the corner, running his vocal exercises for the 15th time that night while everyone else was getting ready for bed. And here's what really gets to old stays when they think back on this. During the missions on the survival show, Seungmin was consistently underestimated. Not by the other members, they always supported him, always believed in him. But by the narrative, by the editing, by the structure of the show itself. The cameras gravitated toward the flashier moments, the explosive rap battles, the jaw-dropping dance breaks, the emotional confrontations. And Seungmin? He was just there. Solid. Reliable. Doing his job without demanding attention. And that, ironically, is exactly what made him invisible to casual viewers, but absolutely essential to the people who were actually paying attention. JYP himself, Park Jin-young, recognized it during evaluations. There were moments on the show where JYP would critique the group's performance, and he'd pause on Seungmin and say something that basically amounted to, "You've improved more than anyone." And that wasn't empty praise. That was a man who has trained some of the biggest artists in K-pop history looking at a kid who walked in off the street and saying, "I see what you're doing, and it's working." Fast forward to today, 2026, and Kim Seungmin is widely recognized as one of the most stable live vocalists in the 4th generation of K-pop. His voice is the anchor of Stray Kids' vocal line. When the group performs live, not lip-syncing, not using heavy backing tracks, but actually singing, Seungmin is the one who holds the center. The one whose pitch doesn't waver. The one who sounds on a random Tuesday night concert exactly like he sounds on the studio recording. And every single time old stays hear him hit those notes with that effortless clarity, they remember. They remember the audition room. They remember the fluorescent lights. They remember a 16-year-old kid singing a Day 6 song with nothing but sincerity and a dream. They remember that he was the only one who walked in through the front door and never, ever looked back. And that is why Seungmin's journey sits at number 7 on this list. Not because it's the least important, but because it's the foundation. The quiet, unshakable foundation that everything else was built on. Now, you think that was emotional? You think that story hit hard? Oh, you have no idea what's coming. Because number 6? Number 6 involves the youngest member of Stray Kids, a moment so raw and so heartbreaking that even the other members couldn't hold it together. If you're not already subscribed, now is the time because you're gonna want to be here for what comes next. Stay locked in. Number 6. The magne who almost drowned in his own tears, the breakdown that changed everything. Alright, take a breath. Seriously. Take a deep breath right now because what I'm about to tell you, this one doesn't just tug at your heartstrings. It rips them out. And if you were a stay back in late 2017 watching the Stray Kids survival show in real time, episode by episode, week by week, refreshing your screen every Friday night, then you already know exactly who I'm talking about before I even say his name. Hyunjin. IN. The magne. The baby of Stray Kids. Born February 8, 2001, which means when the survival show started filming, this kid, and I mean kid, was barely 16 years old in international age. 16. Let that sink in for a second. Think about what you were doing at 16. Maybe stressing about a math test. Maybe figuring out your first crush. Maybe arguing with your parents about curfew. Now imagine being 16 and standing in a JYP entertainment practice room at 1 in the morning, surrounded by guys who are older than you, more experienced than you, more skilled than you in almost every measurable way. And knowing that cameras are recording every single moment of your struggle for a national television audience to judge. That was Hyunjin's reality. Every single day. And here's the context that makes this even more devastating. When Bangchan was forming the original lineup for what would become Stray Kids, he handpicked members based on what he saw in them. Raw potential. Something special. A spark. And when he chose Hyunjin, a lot of people inside and outside JYP raised their eyebrows. Because on paper, Hyunjin didn't make sense. He was the youngest by a significant margin. His training period was one of the shortest in the group. He wasn't a rapper, and Stray Kids was clearly positioning itself as a rap-heavy, self-producing powerhouse. He wasn't a main dancer. His vocals were still developing sweet and bright, yes, but unrefined, still searching for their identity. So why was he there? Why did Bangchan look at this skinny kid with braces and a baby face and say, yeah, he's one of us? Old stays know the answer. And it's an answer that only reveals itself when you watch the survival show closely, not just the performances, but the in-between moments. The practice room footage. The late-night conversations. The van rides between schedules. Because what Bangchan saw in Hyunjin wasn't technical skill. It was heart. An almost absurd amount of heart packed into the smallest, youngest body in the room. But here's the brutal truth, heart doesn't protect you from reality. And the reality of the Stray Kids survival show was merciless. Every mission, every evaluation, every stage was a test. And every test had the same underlying question. Do you deserve to be here? For members like Changbin and Han, who could write and perform at near professional levels already, that question was easier to answer. For Hyunjin, whose stage presence was magnetic even as a trainee, the answer was self-evident. But for Hyunjin, that question haunted him. You could see it in his eyes during evaluations. That flicker of doubt. That tiny flinch whenever JYP Park Jin-young himself would begin his critique after a group performance. Hyunjin would stand there, hands clasped in front of him, shoulders slightly hunched, braces visible behind lips that were trying very hard not to tremble, and he would wait. Wait for the words he was terrified of hearing. You're not ready. You're falling behind. You're the weak link. And the devastating part? Sometimes those words did come. Not always directly, not always that bluntly, but the implication was there. In a group of extraordinarily talented trainees, Hyunjin's skill gaps were visible. During vocal evaluations, his pitch would waver under pressure while Seungmin's held steady. During dance practices, his body would lag a half beat behind Lee No and Hyunjin, who moved like they were born on a stage. During rap sections, forget it. He was a vocalist in a group that breathed hip-hop, and that disconnect was painfully obvious. And old stays, the ones who watched the show live, who were in the trenches of early fandom, they remember the exact moment it all came crashing down. It happened during one of the mid-show evaluations. The members had just finished a mission stage, and they were gathered for feedback. The atmosphere was already tense. It always was during these segments, because everyone knew that poor performance could mean elimination. JYP began his critique, and as he moved through the members, you could feel the room getting heavier. And then he got to Hyunjin. And he didn't sugarcoat it. The feedback was honest, painfully, necessarily honest, the way only a mentor who genuinely wants you to improve can be. But for a 16-year-old boy who had been pouring every ounce of his energy into getting better, who had been sleeping 3 hours a night to practice, who had been quietly comparing himself to his hyungs and finding himself lacking every single time, that honest feedback was a sledgehammer to the chest. Hyunjin broke. Not slowly. Not gracefully. He broke. The tears came fast and hard, the kind of crying that a teenage boy tries desperately to suppress because he doesn't want to look weak, which only makes it worse. His shoulders shook. His voice cracked into fragments when he tried to speak. And what came out of his mouth between the sobs, that is what destroyed every single person watching. "I'm sorry," he said. Not, "It's not fair." Not, "I tried my best." Not, "Give me another chance." Just, "I'm sorry. Sorry for not being good enough. Sorry for holding the team back. Sorry for being the reason the group might lose points. Sorry for existing in a space where he felt he didn't belong." A 16-year-old boy, apologizing for having a dream that was bigger than his current ability to fulfill it. And if that doesn't absolutely wreck you, I don't know what will. But here is where the moment transforms from heartbreaking to something sacred. Something that defines what Stray Kids is at its absolute core. Because the second those tears started falling, the other members moved. Not after a pause. Not after exchanging uncertain glances. Immediately. Instinctively. Like a reflex. Bang Chan was the first one there, of course he was, because that's who Bang Chan is. He wrapped his arms around Hyunjin without a word. No lecture. No, it's okay. You'll do better next time, platitude. Just arms. Just presence. Just, "I'm here." And then Changbin was there. And Han. And Hyunjin. And Lino. And Felix. And Seungmin. One by one, they surrounded the magne like a human shield, as if they could physically protect him from the weight of his own self-doubt. And old stays, God, old stays remember this so vividly. The camera caught Changbin's face during this moment, and he was fighting his own tears. Changbin, the guy who raps about being tough, who projects this hard, confident exterior on stage, his lower lip was trembling as he watched his youngest member fall apart. Because in that practice room, they weren't performers. They weren't trainees competing for a debut slot. They were brothers. And one of their brothers was hurting. And what happened after that breakdown is what separates I.N story from just another sad K-pop trainee moment. Because Hyunjin didn't quit. He didn't retreat. He didn't start playing it safe or fading into the background to avoid criticism. He came back the next day and practiced harder. Old stays who followed the survival show closely remember noticing something shift in Hyunjin after that breakdown. There was a new fire in his eyes, not the desperate, panicked kind, but something quieter and far more dangerous. Determination that had been forged in the furnace of his lowest moment. He started staying later in the practice room. He started recording himself and watching playback obsessively, picking apart every flaw, every missed beat, every breath in the wrong place. He asked the vocal coaches for extra sessions. He asked Lino to help him with choreography after hours. He asked Changbin to teach him how to find rhythm in rap verses even though rapping wasn't his role, because he wanted to understand every element of what Stray Kids was building. And slowly, so slowly that you almost didn't notice it unless you were paying close attention, Hyunjin started to improve. Not in dramatic leaps. Not in sudden Hollywood movie transformations. In tiny, incremental steps that only someone watching very carefully would catch. His pitch stabilized. His dance timing tightened. His stage presence, that intangible thing that separates a performer from someone who's just standing on a stage, started to emerge. By the final episodes of the survival show, Hyunjin wasn't the weak link anymore. He wasn't the member you watched through your fingers, hoping he wouldn't make a mistake. He was the member you watched with a lump in your throat because you remembered. You remembered the tears. You remembered the "I'm sorry." You remembered a kid who thought he wasn't good enough and decided to prove himself wrong not with words, but with work. Fast forward to now, 2026, and young Hyunjin is one of the most beloved magnates in all of K-pop. His vocals have matured into something genuinely beautiful, bright, clear, emotionally resonant in a way that his 16-year-old self could never have imagined. Number 5, the stage that went silent, the return that shook an entire industry. Okay, I need you to really lock in for this one. Because number 5 on our list isn't just a moment. It's an entire chapter. A chapter that lasted months that felt like years for every stay who lived through it in real time. And if you're an old stay, the second you read the name I'm about to say, your chest is going to tighten. You're going to remember exactly where you were, what you were doing, how the air felt different that day. Hyunjin. Born March 20th, 2000. The performance powerhouse. The member whose stage presence is so overwhelming, so magnetic, so impossibly captivating that even people who don't follow K-pop stop scrolling when he appears on their screen. Hyunjin doesn't just perform, he consumes the stage. Every movement, every glance, every flick of his hair is a statement. He's the kind of artist that choreographers dream about working with because he doesn't just execute moves, he interprets them. He turns a 4 count into a story. He makes you feel something just by the way he extends his arm. That's Hyunjin. That's who he's always been. And in early 2021, he disappeared. Not from the internet. Not from social media. From everything. And the silence was deafening. Here's what happened, and I'm going to be real with you, because this story deserves honesty, not sugarcoating. In February 2021, allegations surfaced online regarding Hyunjin's behavior during his school years. The Korean internet, which moves faster and hits harder than almost any online space in the world, erupted. Accusations, counter-accusations, screenshots, testimonies, the whole thing became a wildfire overnight. JYP Entertainment initially responded, and then Hyunjin himself wrote a personal letter. An apology. Not a corporate PR statement drafted by a team of lawyers and communication specialists. A letter from him. In his own words. And in that letter, he acknowledged that he had caused pain to people during his younger years, and he expressed genuine remorse. He didn't make excuses. He didn't deflect. He didn't hide behind legal language or corporate shields. He took responsibility. A 20-year-old idol, at the peak of his career, with millions of fans worldwide, wrote a handwritten apology and stepped away from the group. Voluntarily. Indefinitely. And then silence. No Instagram updates. No V-Live appearances. No fan cams. No behind-the-scenes content. No Hyunjin. For stays, it was like someone had ripped a piece out of the picture and left a hole that nothing could fill. And this is where the story gets really, really important, because what happened during Hyunjin's absence reveals something about the Stray Kids fandom that goes far beyond normal fan behavior. It reveals something almost sacred. Because stays didn't move on. They didn't adjust. They didn't quietly accept a 7-member version of Stray Kids and pretend everything was fine. They waited. Actively. Loudly. Unapologetically. Old stays remember this period with a clarity that's almost painful. The fan projects. The hashtags. The streaming campaigns dedicated to Hyunjin's past performances. The fan art that flooded Twitter and Instagram. Not angry art, not protest art, but art filled with warmth, with patience, with a message that said, "We're here. We're not going anywhere. Take the time you need. We'll be here when you come back." And inside the group itself? The other 7 members never let anyone forget that Stray Kids was 8. This is crucial. This is the part that makes you understand why this group is different. During the months of Hyunjin's absence, Stray Kids was actively competing on Net's Kingdom, Legendary War, a high-stakes survival competition show where established K-pop groups battled for supremacy. The pressure was enormous. The performances were some of the most ambitious, most physically demanding, most emotionally intense stages in K-pop competition history. And they were doing it with a hole in their formation. Every choreography had to be adjusted. Every vocal arrangement had to be rearranged. Every stage that had been designed for 8 bodies now had to work with 7. And not once, did any member act like this was a permanent arrangement. In interviews, they said 8. In conversations, they referenced Hyunjin naturally, casually, the way you mention a family member who's traveling but will be home soon. Bang Chan, on his late-night live sessions, what fans call Chan's room, addressed the situation with the kind of quiet, steady leadership that defines him. He didn't make grand promises. He didn't create drama. He simply said, in his own way, that the group was 8, had always been 8, and would always be 8. And Stays held on to those words like a lifeline. Now, let's talk about the return. Because this is where number 5 earns its place on this list. It was around July 2021. Approximately 5 months of absence. 5 months of silence, of waiting, of empty spaces in choreographies, and missing harmonies in vocal arrangements. And then, without massive fanfare, without a press conference, without a dramatic cinematic trailer, a Hyunjin came back. And the venue for his return couldn't have been more perfect if a screenwriter had scripted it. Kingdom. The competition show that Stray Kids had been battling through for months, with 7 members. The show where they had poured blood, sweat, and literal tears into stages that pushed the boundaries of what K-pop performance could be. And in the final chapter of that competition, Hyunjin was there. Back on stage. Back in formation. Back where he belonged. Old Stays who watched that broadcast live, and I mean live, sitting in front of their screens at whatever ungodly hour it aired in their time zone, described the moment they saw Hyunjin step onto that stage as something almost out of body. The chat exploded. Social media platforms genuinely struggled under the traffic surge. Fans who had been holding it together for 5 months, being strong, being patient, being supportive from a distance, finally broke down. Not from sadness. From relief. Because he was back. He was really back. And here's the thing that Old Stays will tell you made them completely lose it. It wasn't just that Hyunjin returned. It was how he returned. He didn't come back diminished. He didn't come back tentative, testing the waters, easing himself in carefully. He came back like a hurricane. His dancing was sharper. His expressions were deeper. His stage presence, already legendary before the hiatus, had somehow evolved into something even more intense. It was as if the months away had given him time to look inward, to process, to grow, and he had channeled every ounce of that internal journey into his artistry. The camera found his face during one of the performances, and what Stays saw in his eyes wasn't the carefree sparkle of the pre-hiatus Hyunjin. It was something heavier, something more textured. The eyes of someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side not unscathed, but forged. There's a reason why performers who've experienced genuine hardship often become more compelling on stage. It's because real emotion can't be faked. And Hyunjin, after everything he'd been through, was performing with a raw emotional authenticity that turned every stage into something you didn't just watch, you felt. And the members. Oh, the members. The way they looked at him during that first stage back. The micro-expressions caught by eagle-eyed fans who slowed down the footage frame by frame. The tiny smiles exchanged during formations. The way the choreography suddenly looked complete again, like a puzzle that had been missing its centerpiece and finally was whole. Felix's face. There's a fancam that Old Stays still circulate to this day, the moment Felix caught sight of Hyunjin during a formation change, and this enormous, uncontrollable grin broke across his face. Not a performance smile. A real smile. The kind of smile that happens when your brother comes home. Fast forward to now, 2026, and Hwang Hyunjin stands as one of the most respected performers in the 4th generation and arguably in all of K-pop. His solo work, his artistic expression, his continued evolution as a dancer and performer have proven beyond any doubt that his place in Stray Kids isn't just justified, it's essential. But for old stays, the Hyunjin they see on today's world tour stages will always carry the ghost of that silence. That 5-month void. They'll always remember what it felt like to stream old fan cams at 3 a.m. just to see him dance. They'll always remember the fan projects, the hashtags, the quiet, stubborn refusal to let go. And most of all, they'll always remember the moment he came back. The moment the stage was 8 again. And that return didn't just prove that Hyunjin belonged in Stray Kids. It proved that Stray Kids and stays are the kind of family that doesn't abandon its own. Not when it's easy. Not when it's hard. Not ever. That is number 5. And I know, some of you are sitting there thinking, if that was number 5, what could possibly be higher on this list? Oh, you sweet, innocent soul. Number 4 involves a member who fought a battle that no one could see, a war that happened entirely inside his own mind. Number 4, the war nobody could see, the stage he almost never stood on. Listen to me very carefully right now. Because what I'm about to tell you at number 4, this isn't a story about a tough choreography. It's not about a difficult high note or a stage mishap or a comeback that didn't chart well. This is about a war. A real, brutal, unforgiving war that was fought entirely inside one person's mind, while he was smiling on camera, while he was spitting bars that left audiences speechless, while he was co-producing tracks that topped charts around the world. And the cruelest part? Nobody could see it. Not the fans in the front row. Not the millions watching through their screens. Not even the members standing right next to him, at least, not at first. Jisung. Born September 14, 2000. 1/3 of 3 Racha, Stray Kids legendary producing trio alongside Bangchan and Changbin. A main rapper whose flow is so versatile, so technically advanced, so impossibly quick that hip-hop heads who don't even follow K-pop tip their hats. A vocalist whose tone carries this emotional weight that makes you feel like he's singing directly into your chest cavity. A songwriter who has co-written and co-produced so many Stray Kids tracks that his Comca credits read like an encyclopedia. On paper, Jisung is one of the most complete artists in the 4th generation of K-pop. Triple Threat doesn't even begin to cover it. He raps like he was born with a metronome in his bloodstream. He sings with a vulnerability that strips every lyric down to raw nerve. He writes music that has defined an entire group's sonic identity. And he does all of it, while fighting a battle that most people will never fully understand unless they've been through it themselves. Anxiety disorder. Panic disorder. The kind that doesn't care if you're backstage at a sold-out arena. The kind that doesn't check your schedule before it decides to attack. The kind that can turn a normal Tuesday morning into a battlefield and a concert stage into the most terrifying place on the planet. And here's what people who've never experienced clinical anxiety need to understand, because this is where the edutainment part of this narration really matters. Anxiety at this level isn't nervousness. It's not butterflies in your stomach. It's not the mild jitteriness you feel before a job interview or a first date. Panic disorder is your body's fight or flight system activating at full power in situations where there is no actual danger. Your heart rate spikes to 150, 160, 170 beats per minute, the same rate as if you were sprinting for your life from a predator. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Your vision narrows. Your hands go numb. Your chest tightens so severely that many people experiencing their first panic attack genuinely believe they're having a heart attack. And the most insidious part? It can happen anywhere. At any time. Without warning. Now imagine that. Imagine experiencing that, not in the privacy of your bedroom where you can curl up under a blanket and ride it out. Imagine experiencing that on a stage. Under spotlights that are literally as bright as the sun. In front of 15,000 people who paid money to watch you perform. With cameras broadcasting your face to millions more around the world in real time. With choreography that demands precise physical coordination. With rap verses that require perfect breath control and timing down to the millisecond. That is what Jisung has faced. And old stays, the ones who've been watching closely, who know what to look for. They've seen the moments. The moments that casual viewers miss entirely. There were performances where eagle-eyed fans noticed Han's hands trembling slightly during the opening formation, not from cold, not from exhaustion, but from the adrenaline surge of an anxiety spike hitting him right as the stage lights came up. There were fan cams where you could see him take one extra breath, just one between lines, a breath that wasn't in the choreography, wasn't part of the routine, but was him desperately trying to ground himself in the present moment while his nervous system screamed at him to run. There were fan sign events, intimate, close contact events where idols sit across a table from fans and interact one-on-one, where Han's energy would shift, where the playful, chaotic, endlessly witty Jisung that fans adore would briefly flicker, and underneath it you could see a young man fighting his own brain to stay present, to stay engaged, to not let the anxiety win. And he talked about it. This is the part that separates Han's story from so many others in the K-pop industry, an industry that has historically treated mental health like a taboo topic, something to be managed privately, hidden from public view, never acknowledged in official settings. Han didn't hide it. Not entirely. In V-Live sessions, in interviews, in the lyrics he wrote, he let people in. Not dramatically. Not for sympathy. But with an honesty that was almost radical in the context of K-pop culture. He acknowledged that he struggled. He acknowledged that there were days when getting on stage felt like walking into a fire. He talked about the techniques he used to cope, breathing exercises, grounding methods, the support of his members, professional help. And old stays remember specific moments that are burned into fandom memory. There was a period, and veteran stays know exactly which period I'm talking about, when Han stepped back from certain public activities. Not a full hiatus. Not a dramatic announcement. Just a quiet, partial withdrawal from schedules that were too triggering, too overwhelming, too much for his system to handle at that point in time. And the group adjusted. Without complaint. Without awkwardness. Without making it into a bigger thing than it needed to be. They simply closed ranks, covered for him, and gave him the space he needed. Bang Chan, always Bang Chan, addressed it in Chan's room with his characteristic blend of warmth and directness. He didn't overshare. He didn't violate Han's privacy. He simply let stays know that their boy was taking care of himself, that taking care of yourself is not weakness, and that the group would always prioritize each member's well-being over any schedule, any performance, any chart position. And then Han came back to the stage. And this is the moment that old stays still replay in their minds, still talk about in group chats, still get emotional about when they think back on it. Because watching Han Jisung perform after knowing what it costs him, after understanding the invisible war he fights every single time he steps under those lights, transforms the experience of watching him entirely. Every rap verse becomes an act of defiance. Every high note becomes a middle finger to the anxiety that tried to steal his voice. Every dance move becomes proof that the human spirit is capable of extraordinary things when it refuses, absolutely refuses, to surrender. There's a specific concert fancam that circulates among old stays like a sacred text. In it, Han is performing one of Stray Kids' most intense tracks. The choreo is brutal. The energy is maximum. And at one point, just for a fraction of a second, the camera catches his face in a moment of genuine, unguarded exhilaration. Not performing exhilaration. Not stage persona exhilaration. Real joy. The joy of a man who knows exactly what it took to get to this moment and is allowing himself, just for that fraction of a second, to feel the magnitude of it. He's on stage. He's performing. He's doing the thing that his anxiety told him he couldn't do. And he's not just doing it, he's dominating it. He's rapping with a ferocity that shakes the speakers. He's moving with a precision that makes the choreography look easy. He's giving 15,000 people the performance of their lives, and somewhere inside him, the anxious boy who once thought about walking away is watching all of this and realizing that he made the right choice. He stayed. And that choice, the choice to stay, to fight, to keep stepping onto stages that terrify him, to keep creating music that pours out of the most vulnerable parts of himself, that choice has saved people. Literally. The messages that pour into Stray Kids fan channels from stays who struggle with their own anxiety, their own mental health battles, their own invisible wars. Messages that say, Han made me feel like it's okay to not be okay, or I went to therapy because Jisung talked about it, and I realized there's no shame in asking for help. Those messages are real. Those are real people whose lives were tangibly, measurably changed because one idol had the courage to say, I'm struggling in an industry that told him to keep smiling. In 2026, Han Jisung continues to perform, continues to write, continues to produce, continues to be one of the most vital creative forces in all of K-pop. His anxiety hasn't disappeared. It doesn't work like that, and anyone who tells you it does is lying. But he has learned to coexist with it. To perform not in spite of it, but through it. Number 3. The name that was erased, the comeback that rewrote history. Alright, we're at number 3 now. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. What happened at number 3 on this list is not just a sad moment from a survival show. This is the moment that almost erased one of the most essential members of Stray Kids from existence. Not from the group. From the entire K-pop timeline. If this moment had gone differently, if one decision had stayed permanent, the Stray Kids you know today would simply not exist. The choreography would be different. The dynamics would be different. The energy, the humor, the soul of the group would have a hole in it that nothing and no one could fill. We're talking about Lee Miho. Lee No. Born October 25th, 1998. The main dancer. The man whose movement on stage is so fluid, so controlled, so effortlessly powerful that choreographers have publicly stated he's one of the most naturally gifted dancers they've ever worked with. The member whose duality, stone cold savage one second, unbearably soft the next, has become the stuff of K-pop legend. The guy who loves his 3 cats more than he loves most humans and makes absolutely zero apology for it. That's Lee No. And in late 2017, during the filming of the Stray Kids survival show, JYP Park Jin-young himself looked at Lee Miho and said, essentially, you're out. And the ground fell out from under everything. But before we get to that moment, the moment that still makes old stays physically flinch when they rewatch it, you need to understand who Lee Miho was before Stray Kids. Because his backstory isn't the typical K-pop trainee pipeline story, and that backstory is exactly what makes his elimination so devastatingly ironic. Before JYP Entertainment, before the survival show, before Stray Kids was even a concept, Lee Miho was already on some of the biggest stages in the world. As a backup dancer. For BTS. Let that sink in. This kid, because he was still a kid, barely out of high school, was dancing behind one of the biggest acts on the planet. He was on stage during BTS promotions, executing choreography at the highest professional level, sharing a stage with artists who were already reshaping the global music industry. He wasn't a trainee dreaming about performing someday. He was already performing. At the top. Just not in the spotlight. And that experience, the experience of being on the stage, but not being seen on the stage, shaped Lee Miho in ways that would become both his greatest strength and his most dangerous vulnerability. Because being a backup dancer teaches you technical perfection. It teaches you precision, synchronization, the ability to execute complex choreography flawlessly night after night. What it does not teach you is how to stand out. How to project your identity through movement. How to make an audience look at you when there are 7 other people on stage. As a backup dancer, your entire job is to not stand out. To support. To enhance. To be invisible in service of someone else's spotlight. And when Lee Miho walked into JYP Entertainment and was selected for the Stray Kids survival show, that backup dancer training was embedded in his muscle memory. His technique was flawless, arguably the best in the entire trainee group. His execution was clean. His timing was surgical. But JYP saw something, or rather, he didn't see something. During the early missions on the survival show, JYP's feedback to Miho kept circling around the same theme. You're technically excellent. Your dancing is clean. But where are you? Where is Lee Miho in this performance? I see a perfect backup dancer. I don't see an artist with his own identity. And that critique, God, old stays remember this so viscerally, that critique was the setup for what would become one of the most shocking moments in K-pop survival show history. It happened during the elimination episode. The members were gathered. The atmosphere was suffocating. Everyone knew that eliminations were coming. The show had been building toward this moment for weeks, and the tension was unbearable. The members stood in a line, and JYP began to speak. And when he said Lee Miho's name, when he said that Miho would be leaving the group, the room didn't explode. It imploded. There's a difference. An explosion is loud and outward. An implosion is the opposite. Everything collapses inward. Silently. Devastatingly. And that's exactly what happened to every person in that room. The camera, and bless the camera operators on that show, because they captured something that no script could have written. The camera caught the other members' faces in real time. And what it captured was not just disappointment. Not just sadness. It was disbelief. Genuine, unprocessed, this cannot be happening, disbelief. Changbin's jaw tightened so hard you could see the muscles in his face lock up. Han's eyes went wide, not crying yet, not processing yet, just frozen in that horrible liminal space between hearing something and understanding it. Seungmin looked at the floor like the floor might open up and swallow the moment whole. I.N. The magne, already fragile, already carrying his own fears about being eliminated, looked like someone had physically struck him. And Bangchan. Oh, Bangchan. This is where it gets almost unwatchable for old stays. Because Bangchan was the one who built this team. He was the leader. He had personally vouched for every single member in this lineup. He had gone to JYP and said, "These are my guys. This is the group." And now one of his guys, one of the people he had believed in, fought for, envisioned a future with, was being removed. And there was nothing he could do about it. The footage of Bangchan's face during this announcement has been analyzed, screenshotted, GIF'd, and discussed thousands of times across every social media platform. And every time, the conclusion is the same: you are watching a young man's heartbreak in real time. Not dramatically. Not with big theatrical tears and wailing. Just a quiet, devastating collapse behind his eyes. The look of someone who is trying to be strong for his team while his entire world is fracturing. And Miho himself, Lino, the future main dancer of one of the biggest K-pop groups on earth, stood there. And he didn't crumble. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He stood there with a composure that, in hindsight, was almost more heartbreaking than tears would have been. Because you could see it in his face, the backup dancer training kicking in one final time. Don't stand out. Don't make a scene. Support the moment even if the moment is destroying you. The invisible, even now. Especially now. He accepted it. He bowed. And he walked away. And for old stays watching at home, something fundamentally broke. Because this wasn't a reality show twist. This wasn't manufactured drama designed to boost ratings. This was a real person, a person they had grown to care about over the preceding episodes, being told that his dream was over. That he wasn't enough. That the team he had started to think of as family was moving forward without him. The weeks that followed were agonizing. For the members still on the show, the absence was palpable. Formations felt wrong. Practice rooms felt emptier. The chemistry that had been building, that intangible thing that happens when the right group of people come together, felt disrupted. Like a song playing in the wrong key. Not terrible. Just off. Something was missing. And the members knew something was missing. They said it. Not in grand speeches, but in small moments. In offhand comments during practice. In the way they'd glance at the space where Miho used to stand in formation and then quickly look away, as if the empty space was too painful to acknowledge directly. And then it happened. JYP brought him back. The exact circumstances, the exact conversations that happened behind closed doors, the exact process by which the decision was reversed, fans may never know all the details. But what is known is this: the show brought Lee Miho back into the group. And the moment the remaining members found out, the moment they learned that Miho was returning, is one of the most emotionally raw, genuinely beautiful pieces of footage in K-pop history. Because these weren't actors performing surprise. These were young men, teenagers, most of them receiving the news that their brother was coming home. And they reacted the way brothers react. With yelling, with tears, with full-body embraces that nearly knocked people off their feet, with the kind of uncontrollable, ugly, beautiful crying that only happens when relief hits you so hard it bypasses every defense mechanism you have. Changbin grabbed him. Actually grabbed him, like he was afraid Miho might disappear again if he let go. Han was laughing and crying simultaneously, that specific human glitch that happens when your emotional system is so overloaded it can't decide which output to use. I.N buried his face in someone's shoulder and just sobbed. And Bang Chan, the leader who had watched helplessly as one of his members was taken away, held on to Miho with an intensity that communicated everything words couldn't. You're back. You're here. Don't leave again. We're complete now. And old stays? They were destroyed. In the best possible way. Destroyed and rebuilt in the same moment, the same way Stray Kids was destroyed and rebuilt. Number 2, the boy from Sydney whose voice stunned the world, the goodbye that nobody believed was real. If number 3 felt like a nightmare that old stays still tried to erase from their minds, number 2 felt like the absolute end of the world. Because when this specific moment aired on national television in December 2017, it didn't just break the hearts of everyone watching in South Korea. It sent a shockwave across the global K-pop community that resulted in millions of fans screaming at their screens in absolute, unfiltered disbelief. We are talking about Lee Felix, born Felix Lee, Korean name Lee Yobak, born September 15, 2000, in the sunny suburbs of Sydney, Australia. A boy who grew up thousands of miles away from the brutal, hyper-competitive pressure cooker of the soul music industry, spending his childhood doing taekwondo, swimming, beatboxing, and living a completely normal life as an Australian teenager. But in early 2017, after being scouted by JYP Entertainment, Felix made a choice that would change his life forever. He packed his bags, said goodbye to his family, left behind his comfortable home in Sydney, and boarded a flight to South Korea to pursue a dream that felt almost impossibly distant. Think about what that takes for a 16-year-old kid. You don't speak fluent Korean. You don't understand the complex hierarchical social customs. You leave your parents, your siblings, your friends, and your entire support system behind to move to a cold, foreign city where you spend 16 hours a day in subterranean practice rooms being evaluated, critiqued, and judged against trainees who have been preparing for this their entire lives. And then came the voice. Oh, that voice. When people first look at Felix, they see a boy who looks like he stepped straight out of an anime fantasy. Soft features, bright eyes, delicate freckles dusted across his cheeks, and a smile that can instantly light up an entire room. But the second he opens his mouth to rap or speak, a thunderous, sub-zero, earth-shaking bass tone comes echoing out of his chest that defies every law of human physics. In a fourth-generation K-pop landscape that was heavily dominated by high-tenor vocalists and crisp, fast-paced rappers, Felix's natural vocal timbre was an absolute anomaly, a deep, cavernous frequency that vibrated through your ribcage. But back in 2017, during the filming of the Stray Kids survival show, that legendary deep voice was both a blessing and a terrifying hurdle. Because to rap effectively in Korean at 3 ratchets breakneck speeds, you need absolute mastery over Korean diction, phrasing, and rapid consonant transitions. And for Felix, who was still desperately trying to translate his thoughts from English to Korean in real time under extreme psychological stress, the language barrier felt like an insurmountable mountain. Every single day was a battle against his own tongue. While the other trainees were refining their stage presence, Felix was staying up past 3 in the morning with vocabulary flashcards, writing out Korean lyrics phonetically, and repeating complex sentences over and over until his vocal cords were raw. And Bang Chan, who also grew up in Sydney, Australia, took Felix under his wing with a protective, big brother devotion that went far beyond normal leader duties. Chan knew what it felt like to be a kid from Australia lost in the cold streets of Seoul. He translated for Felix, taught him how to adjust his rap cadence, cooked for him, and constantly reassured him that he was an irreplaceable part of Stray Kids. But the survival show had no mercy. When episode 8 arrived, the pressure reached a boiling point during the unit evaluation mission. Felix was assigned a heavy, fast-paced rap section that required precise, rhythmic Korean delivery. He poured every ounce of his soul into that performance, working until his feet bled and his eyes were bloodshot from sleep deprivation. But when the lights came down and Park Jin-young delivered his critique, the feedback was cold and uncompromising. JYP stated that Felix's Korean language struggle was still pulling down the emotional impact of his rap, preventing the audience from fully connecting with his lines. And then, with an eerie, clinical calm that froze the blood in everyone's veins, JYP uttered the words that no one thought could ever be spoken. The trainee who will be eliminated today is Felix. When those words hit the air, the reaction in that room wasn't just sadness, it was a visceral, soul-crushing emotional breakdown. Felix stood there on stage, his hands trembling violently, tears quietly spilling over his freckled cheeks as he immediately began apologizing to his members. He didn't complain. He didn't ask why. In his own mind, he felt he had failed the 8 brothers who had welcomed him, failed the leader who had brought him from Australia, and ruined the dream they were all building together. And then came the moment, the single most iconic, heart-wrenching, unscripted interaction in K-pop survival show history. As the reality of the elimination settled over the stage, Bang Chan walked over to Felix, wrapped his arms around the younger boy's neck, and pulled him into an embrace so tight it looked like he was trying to physically hold Felix's world together. Bang Chan was weeping hysterically, his shoulders heaving, his face red and stained with tears, and right there, thousands of miles away from home in a cold Seoul recording studio, Chan held Felix's face in his hands and whispered in English, "Always find me, yeah? I'm not gonna leave you behind." Read those words again. "Always find me, yeah? I'm not gonna leave you behind." That was not an idol reciting a script. That was 2 Australian boys who had crossed an ocean together, clinging to each other in the dark as their shared dream was torn in half right before their eyes. Changbin, who had spent countless hours tutoring Felix's rap lines late into the night, broke down completely, burying his face in his hands while Felix kept sobbing, "I'm sorry, Hyung. I'm so sorry." That raw exchange instantly went viral across the globe, sparking an unprecedented international backlash. Social media exploded with outrage, petitions were launched, fan forums were flooded with tears, and stays around the world flatly refused to accept a version of Stray Kids without Felix's deep voice and gentle heart. And when episode 10 arrived, the final live broadcast where JYP gave both Lee No and Felix one final chance to perform with the group, the live audience and global viewers delivered an overwhelming, unanimous 96% vote in favor of a 9-member Stray Kids. JYP yielded to the undeniable truth that the universe had already decided. Stray Kids was only whole when all of them stood together. Fast forward to 2026, and Lee Felix is one of the most recognizable global superstars on planet Earth. He is a house ambassador for Louis Vuitton, a global style icon, a dedicated UNICEF donor who spends his vacation time volunteering abroad, and the owner of the most iconic, viral low bass lines in modern music from the legendary "Cooking Like a Chef, I'm a 5-star Michelin" in God's Menu to the explosive hooks of Maniac, La 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 La, and CHK Boom. But whenever old stays hear that thunderous voice command a stadium of 80,000 screaming fans, their minds instantly travel back to December 2017. They remember the freckled boy from Sydney crying in his leader's arms, wondering if his voice was enough. And they smile through their tears, knowing that the boy who was once told he didn't belong ended up shaking the entire world. That is number 2 on our list. If this story gave you goosebumps, smash that like button right now, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more epic K-pop documentary content. Now, are you ready for the ultimate crowned moment? The number 1 Stray Kids moment that started it all, a moment so legendary, so foundational, that without it, none of this history would exist? Whenever you're ready to complete the list, just say next and let's bring it home. Number 1, the unbreakable pact that built an empire, the self-made legend that changed K-pop forever. Here we are. The pinnacle. The ultimate moment that started this entire global phenomenon, and the single memory that every day one stay carries like a sacred badge of honor. Because to truly understand why Stray Kids is the global powerhouse they are today in 2026, selling out massive stadiums across North America, Europe, and Asia, shattering Billboard records, and leading the fourth generation of K-pop with an iron grip, you have to go all the way back to the moment that defied every single rule in the K-pop playbook. A moment that didn't happen because of a multi-million-dollar corporate board meeting or an executive producer casting call, but because one young man, after 7 long years of waiting in the dark, refused to let his dream die. We are talking about Bang Chan, Christopher Bong, and the birth of 3 Racha and Hellevator in 2017. To fully grasp why this is number 1, you need to understand how the K-pop industry traditionally works. For decades, the big 3 agencies, SM, YG, and JYP, followed a strict, top-down corporate formula. Company executives select trainees, external producers write the songs, hired choreographers create the dances, and A&R teams craft the image. The idols are presented with a finished product and told to execute it. But in late 2016 and early 2017, Bang Chan did something unprecedented inside JYP Entertainment. Having trained since 2010 alongside future stars like GOT7's Bam Bam and Yugyeom, Chan had watched his friends debut one by one while he remained in the trainee basement year after year. Most people would have broken. Most trainees would have packed up and gone back to Australia. But Bang Chan didn't break, he built. He linked up with 2 younger trainees who shared his obsessive passion for music production, Seo Changbin, Spurb, and Han Jisung, J.1. Together, under the underground moniker 3 Racha, they started writing, composing, and mixing their own tracks on laptops in tiny, windowless practice rooms at 2 in the morning, uploading mixtapes to SoundCloud without any official company backing. They were raw, loud, aggressive, and fiercely authentic. And when JYP Entertainment decided to launch a new boy group project, Bang Chan was granted a level of freedom never before given to a trainee in JYP history. He was allowed to personally handpick the members of his own team. Chan didn't just pick the top-ranked dancers or the most polished vocalists. He handpicked 8 boys based on chemistry, heart, and a shared hunger. Lino, Changbin, Hyunjin, Han, Felix, Seungmin, and N. He looked JYP executives in the eyes and said, "This is my group. We go together, or we don't go at all." And then came Hellevator. Released as a surprise teaser track on October 6, 2017, before the survival show even began airing, Hellevator was a sonic shockwave. Composed and written by 3 Racha themselves, the song was a metaphorical middle finger to the agonizing pressure of trainee life, comparing their journey to riding a dark elevator out of hell toward the light. From the heavy electronic drops and frantic rap flows to the raw, soaring vocal hooks, Hellevator wasn't a shiny, sugar-coated rookie debut track. It was a desperate, angry, beautiful battle cry of 9 boys fighting for their right to exist in an industry that constantly tried to tear them apart. When old stays hear those opening synth notes of Hellevator today, it triggers an instant flood of emotional memories. The late-night practice room footage, the sweat dripping off their hair, the shared meals on practice room floors, and the absolute, unwavering promise made by Bang Chan that no matter how hard the industry pushed, Stray Kids would always be a self-produced, self-made family. It is the moment that laid the foundation for every anthem that followed, from Myro and God's Menu to S-Class and CHK Boom. Without Hellevator and the creation of 3 Racha, there is no Stray Kids. There is no noise music genre defining a generation. There is no unbreakable bond between 8 brothers who survived eliminations, injury, self-doubt, and public scrutiny to stand at the top of the music world together. That is why the self-made origin of Stray Kids stands undisputed at number 1 on our list. Looking back across all 7 of these unforgettable moments, a powerful theme emerges that explains exactly why the bond between Stray Kids and stays is unlike anything else in modern entertainment. Number 7. Seungmin's open audition reminds us that quiet persistence, sincerity, and relentless daily effort can carve a path from total obscurity to main stage greatness. Number 6. I.N's breakdown and growth demonstrates how vulnerability is not weakness, and how the support of true brothers can turn tears of self-doubt into unshakable confidence. Number 5. Hyunjin's return and resilience teaches us about loyalty, forgiveness, and the artistic power of returning from hardship stronger, deeper, and more authentic than ever. Number 4. Jisung's anxiety battle normalizes mental health struggles in an industry that demands perfection, proving that true courage is stepping under the spotlight even when your mind tells you to run. Number 3. Lee's elimination and revival highlights the sheer grit of someone who refused to let an elimination define his identity, returning to prove he was truly irreplaceable. Number 2. Felix's heartbreak and Bang Chan's promise immortalizes the raw human connection behind the phrase, "Always find me, yeah?" proving that love and brotherhood conquer corporate rules. Number 1. 3. Racha and Hellevator celebrates the self-made, rebellious spirit of a group that built their own house from the ground up, forever changing the DNA of K-pop. Stray Kids didn't become legends because they were perfect from day one. They became legends because they were real. They bled, cried, fell down, picked each other back up, and wrote their own story note by note, line by line. And every single stay who walked this path with them, whether you joined during the 2017 survival show or found them yesterday, is a living part of that story. And that wraps up our deep dive documentary on the 7 Stray Kids moments that even old stays still miss. Which of these moments made you tear up the most? Is there another classic pre-debut or early-era moment that you think deserved a spot on this list? Drop your thoughts, memories, and fan stories in the comments section down below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this emotional edutainment journey, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into your favorite music legends. Thank you so much for watching, keep supporting Stray Kids, and as always, stay passionate, stay strong, and stay tuned for the next one. Peace out.